Megaraptorans were the ghosts of the Cretaceous. These sleek, heavily armed carnivores are among the most poorly understood and enigmatic theropods from the fossil record. The group has only been formally recognized since 2010, making it one of the newest large theropod clades on the block, but its members have been found all over the world. Megaraptorans were successful medium to large carnivores in South America, Africa, and Australia during the Late Cretaceous, living alongside and sometimes even replacing giant carcharodontosaurids from the same areas. Along with abelisaurids, Megaraptorans became some of the most dominant apex predators on land during the latest stages of the Cretaceous period in the Southern Hemisphere, and may have even included multiple elephant-sized megatheropods within their ranks. Let's go over the known Megaraptorans, learning what we can about their anatomy, distribution, and traits that led to their 60 million year track record. We'll take a look at the phylogeny of Megaraptorans first, examining the various clades they're a part of so we can have a clear definition of what it means to be a Megaraptoran in the first place. This section is heavily based on Ibirisu et al. 2025, an updated analysis including the newly discovered Joaquin raptor. Megaraptorans are sauropsids, a group that includes the most recent common ancestor of lizards and birds and all its descendants. This is an incredibly diverse and varied group with a variety of body plans, lifestyles, diets, and metabolic strategies stretching all the way back to the Carboniferous period. It's often equated with the common term reptile, although Sauropsida is defined based on pattern of descent rather than it looks scaly and sometimes lays eggs. Within Sauropsida are the Archosauria, the ruling reptiles. This is a more exclusive group, excluding lepidosaurs like lizards and tuataras, as well as the turtles. It leaves only the bird-croc ancestor and everything past that point, united by characters like advanced respiratory systems and four-chambered hearts. Ava metatarsalia is a group of archosaurs with a specific type of ankle joint, indicating a closer relatedness to birds than to pseudosuchians. It includes dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and aphanosaurs. Ornithodyra kicks the aphanosaurs out. This group includes pterosaurs, dinosaurs, and the bizarre Lagurpitids, which aren't quite pterosaurs nor dinosaurs. But don't worry, it gets a little better when we move on to the dinosauriforms. This group definitely includes true dinosaurs, in addition to extremely dinosaur-like reptiles called silosaurs that are sometimes recovered as dinosaurs themselves. Then there are weird dinosauriforms that look like they want to become crocodiles, such as Lagasuchus and Marasuchus. True dinosaurs are defined as the most recent common ancestor of Triceratops and birds and all its descendants, encompassing a huge variety of advanced sauropsids across 230 million years of evolution. From incredibly hyper sugar vampires to four-legged herbivores the size of buildings, dinosaurs have it all, including Saurischians, a group that includes theropods and sauropods. Saurischians are defined by having an anterior pubis and posterior ischium. Saurischia also includes animals descended from species with these traits that secondarily changed their pubis and ischium structure, like birds. You heard theropods. That's what you're here for, right? This group includes Saurischians with 3 claws or toes on their hands and feet, as well as hollow bones, and is my personal favorite dinosaur group to the surprise of absolutely nobody who's ever watched one of my videos. These are often the dinosaurs you find on posters for sci-fi thrillers or on the cover of epic paleo-fantasy novels. Megaraptorans are found within the clade Coelurosauria, a subgroup of theropods united by stiffened tails, long sacra and tibiae, bowed ulnae, and large cerebra. They're typically more adapted for running than the other theropods, the carnosaurs, and were likely more intelligent. Non-Megaraptoran coelurosaurs include tyrannosaurs, ornithomimids, and Megaraptorans, which themselves contain birds. Now finally, how do you tell a Megaraptoran apart from other coelurosaurs? Their exact position within the group is something we're still working on figuring out, although most recent phylogenies based on more complete specimens seem to indicate they're most closely related to tyrannosauroids. Their suite of recognizable physical characteristics includes heavily built, powerful forelimbs with large claws. The first 2 fingers are huge and the third finger is small, for evolutionary reasons we don't really yet understand. Megaraptorans have a long, sleek skull shape. Their teeth aren't large or deep, but they are sharp, indicating a preference for small and medium prey. There's a lot of variability in tooth shape between Megaraptorans, especially in cross-section, suggesting variety in diets across the clade's 60 million year history. To put that into perspective, Megaraptorans were around for almost as long as the entire Cenozoic. The Cretaceous period covered an incredible amount of biological history. As is typical of coelurosaurs, Megaraptorans had slender legs with cursorial proportions. They likely would not have been among the slower theropods, which is one factor that would make them some of the most dangerous predators from a human perspective, were you to go back in time. We've got about an hour and a half of deep dives into that scenario if you're interested. They were lightly built skeletally as well, with heavily pneumatized vertebrae and other bones that provided space for air sacs. That made their bodies lighter and helped make their respiratory systems even more efficient. Their cervical or neck vertebrae were opisthocoelous, meaning they were convex anteriorly and concave posteriorly, fitting together kind of like a ball and socket. A 2016 analysis indicates an Asian origin for the group in the late Jurassic or early Cretaceous, splitting off from the ancestor of Tyrannosauroids or other Tyrannosauroids about 150 million years ago. They then arrived in South America about 103 million years ago, with various analyses conflicting on whether Megaraptorans arrived in Australia or South America first. Multiple interchanges may have occurred across a 10 million year period. A 2024 study indicates that the subgroup of Megaraptorids proper may have originated in Australia and then moved outward to South America. This idea is supported by a frontal bone of an indeterminate Megaraptoran from Victoria, Australia, about 120 million years old. We may be looking at an Asian origin for the first Megaraptorans, splitting off from the other Tyrannosauroids in the late Jurassic, moving to Australia soon after, and then with derived Megaraptorids radiating out into South America. I'm not quite sure when they got to Africa, if Bahariosaurus is in fact a Megaraptoran, and it's still not settled if Megaraptorans are inside of Tyrannosauroidea or a sister group to Tyrannosauroidea. There's a lot of research waiting to be done, most of it requiring more complete specimens than we currently have. Congratulations! You made it through the most complicated part of the video, and odds are you now know more about Megaraptorans than 90% of dinosaur fans. They're a mess, so I understand why they're not mainstream, but they're also wicked cool. Now we can talk about the actual members of the group, covering their body size and physiology, limited as our understanding may be. Phylogeny, hopefully I said that correctly, was a fairly small Megaraptoran, about the size of a brown bear, that lived in early Cretaceous Thailand. Its existence lends credence to the idea we discussed earlier that Megaraptorans had an Asian origin in the late Jurassic. It is unfortunately highly fragmentary, which I'm sorry to say you're just going to have to get used to with this particular group of theropods. We do have enough material to tell that it had powerful ligaments on its fingers, so it likely used its hands and claws in prey capture as well as processing carcasses post-mortem. That ability sets the tone for the rest of the clade, which thrived up until the end Cretaceous extinction some 60 million years after Phylogeny first showed up. Phycoiraptor may also support an Asian origin of Megaraptora, appearing in Japan between 125 and 115 million years ago. It's also the only Megaraptoran I'm aware of that was discovered in a group. A very disassembled group, of course, with quite a few disarticulated individuals in the same quarry, none of which were fully grown. I'm not saying this is evidence for group behavior, especially since many of these bones are isolated elements, but we do have a somewhat decent understanding of its growth series thanks to the site, as well as plenty of teeth. A 2006 study found that Phycoiraptor's teeth were a morphological intermediate between Tyrannosaurs and Carcharodontosaurs, with the wrinkled enamel of Carcharodontosaurs and the blood grooves of Tyrannosaurs. It makes you wonder what they were specializing in. Viuraptor is additional evidence for Megaraptorans originating in Asia, 3 for 3 so far, which is pretty solid. It's at least as old as Phycoiraptor, potentially 5 million years older, and lived in Thailand alongside Phylogeny. Its long, thin legs indicate it was adapted for high speed, a smart tactic when you're only the size of a lioness. Crazy sentence, by the way. Rapator is known from terrible material, a single opalized metacarpal from New South Wales, Australia, morphologically similar to the later Australopithecus. It is, however, approximately 100 million years old, which gives us some understanding of when Megaraptorans may have radiated outwards from Asia into the southern continents. So while the fossil itself isn't particularly interesting anatomically, it still provides useful information in terms of the broad scale of Megaraptoran evolution and biogeography. Aeonaraptor is weird. We barely know anything about it, apart from the fact that it might be synonymous with Qualicho, which is probably a non-Megaraptoran coelurosaur. There's a case that Aeonaraptor is still its own thing, though. The whole genus is a question mark right now. Bahariosaurus ingens is an infamous and enormous theropod from North Africa, with the holotype destroyed during World War II bombing raids by Allied forces. Its identity is contested, with some paleontologists arguing for an Elaphrosaurian identity and presenting it as an enormous beaked herbivore, although those more familiar with the material and its morphology favor a Megaraptoran identity. I find those arguments more convincing, and if you're interested in reading more, I've linked a 40-page essay in the description explaining further. The TLDR is that Bahariosaurus was most likely a titanic Megaraptoran, comparable in size to some of the largest carcharodontosaurids and tyrannosaurids, and may have been one of the most prominent theropod predators of Cretaceous Africa. I love it when the rule of cool overlaps with parsimony. Bahariosaurus isn't the only supergiant Megaraptoran known from sketchy material. El Tío, as it's informally known, is a track maker from the El Molino Formation of Maastrichtian Bolivia. The footprints were so big that they were initially misidentified as sauropod tracks, but further examination indicates a Megaraptoran identity for their creator. El Tío could have been approximately 12 meters long and 7-ish tons, meaning that Tyrannosaurus rex lived at the same time as a Megaraptoran near its own size. These tracks represent the largest preserved theropod footprints in the world. So even accounting for Megaraptorans having proportionally large feet, those size estimates seem quite reasonable. Onto the Megaraptoridae, a subset of Megaraptora, classified by an ulna that's somewhat T-shaped in cross-section. The Lightning Ridge Megaraptoran, informally referred to in online enthusiast circles as Lightning Claw, is the geologically oldest Megaraptor that I'm currently aware of. It was found in an opal mine near New South Wales in Australia and is about the same age as Repeater, while being far more complete. It's known from an ulna, a partial claw, a partial ilium, a fibula, a metatarsal 3, ribs, and gastralia, enough material to be reasonably confident about its family-level identification to the Megaraptoridae. It appears to be broadly similar to Australovenator while being about 10 million years older and 10% larger overall. It seems that Megaraptorids may have originated in Australia after all, and become some of the region's dominant predators before expanding out to South America. Australovenator itself is next. Believe it or not, this is Australia's most complete non-avian theropod skeleton. A sad claim when it's mainly limb material, rib fragments, and a dentary, but here we are. At least from the limbs we can see that Australovenator was likely a fast runner, with a very long tibia relative to his femur. You might remember that to be a build typical of Coelurosaurs in general, and Australovenator certainly didn't forget it. With long legs, powerful hook-clawed hands, and jaws full of sharp curved teeth, it could have pursued prey the size of buffalo and ripped them to shreds. If you thought that Australia was a dangerous, beautiful, and amazing place in the modern day, you'd be completely correct. But in the Cretaceous, things were even more extreme when it came to overtuned land predators. I appreciate that Australia has a rich late Cenozoic fossil record, but gall darn it, I want more Cretaceous goodies. Give me my complete 8-ton Megaraptoran, or... well, I'll probably just be sad, but that ought to be threatening enough. Orcaraptor, despite the name, is not from Middle-earth. It actually represents a huge jump forward in time and across the pond, hailing from Late Cretaceous Argentina, 20 million years after Australovenator and on a different continent. Its tibia is incredibly long, which can lead to significantly exaggerated sizes when calculated on the tibia alone. With how leggy Orcaraptor was, it was probably one of the fastest Megaraptorans out there, if not the very fastest. It lived after the giant South American carcharodontosaurids had already gone extinct, and may have competed with abelisaurids for small prey, using its speed to snatch up animals before its short-snouted rivals could. Murusraptor was slightly earlier, but still lived in a post-carcharodontosaurid Argentina. It took a different strategy, getting bigger rather than faster, with a holotype at 6.4 meters and not yet fully grown. It's one of the few Megaraptorans with half-decent skull material, giving us a decent idea of how the posterior portion of their head was built. The holotype, unfortunately, suffered severe bites to the left side of the head that deformed it, although whether or not those injuries were fatal is unknown. The deformation may have been caused by infection during life or post-mortem damage. Joaquinraptor is exceptional. Part of the Late Cretaceous South America grouping of Megaraptorids, it preserves more than a handful of bones, maybe even as many as a handful and a half. The holotype wasn't done growing, but was likely fairly close. It was actually found with the bitten humerus of a Maastrichtian crocodiliform in its jaws, giving a hint at either a dietary item or a fight between unrelated species. Or both. As the youngest Megaraptoran known, Joaquinraptor may represent the last snapshot into how the group ended up evolutionarily. Medium-sized, generalist predators capable of using their jaws and arms equally to hunt prey in a variety of environments. But we're not done with the group yet. Let's hop back in time, 20 million years to Megaraptor itself, the famous namesake for the iconic clade. Megaraptor lived right during the faunal turnover that saw the carcharodontosaurids go extinct, and was already large-bodied, indicating that Megaraptorans were perhaps more competitive for the medium predator niche than would be expected. At over 7 meters and exceeding 1.5 tons, it's triple the weight of many of the earlier Megaraptorans we covered towards the start of the video. Its enormous hand claws, or manual unguals, were originally thought to be sickle claws of a huge dromaeosaur, hence the name Megaraptor. More remains uncovered later established it as the member of a different group of Coelurosaurs entirely, one that was given the name Megaraptora in 2010. A juvenile specimen found in 2014 revolutionized our understanding of Megaraptoran skull anatomy, giving us enough information to construct the slender-snouted, sharp-toothed, almost pseudo-Alliaraman-looking head shape. Tratayenia is believed to be very closely related to Megaraptor, and is slightly younger as well as larger. That may lend credence to the idea that Megaraptorids pushed for the apex predator slot after the carcs disappeared, racing abelisaurids for the top spot. Tratayenia, based on the holotype, is already large, at nearly 2 tons, and seems to have won the race locally. It was the most massive carnivore in the Bajo de la Carpa formation, and perhaps by even more of a significant degree than the holotype would indicate. A fragmentary specimen, a gigantic caudal vertebra nicknamed Louison, is over 50% larger than the corresponding bone from Arostion, scaling to an enormous 11.9 meters 6-ish ton animal. The remains were discussed in an abstract from 2018, and I'm not aware of any further research done on them, which makes sense. There's only so much you can do with a single gigantocaudal other than say, hey, look guys, it's big. But hey, between Bahariosaurus, El Tío, and Louison, that's 3 megatheropod class Megaraptorans with destroyed or crappy remains. We should start a band. I mentioned Arostion. Now let's talk about it. Arostion is one of the youngest Megaraptorids, living about 72 million years ago, and is also the best preserved of the entire family. A significant portion of the skeleton was found and is used to fill in the gaps for reconstructions of many close relatives. Arostion's bones were highly pneumatized even for Megaraptorids, potentially indicating that it was unusually adapted for high speed and agile activity during hunting. It even preserved a furcula, or wishbone, showing an example of bird-like adaptations in non-Megaraptoran coelurosaurs. It may have filled a similar niche as Nanotyrannus did in North America, and at close to the same time. Maip macrothorax, the cold wind of the shadow of death from Ionic mythology, might not have been the biggest Megaraptorid, not even close actually, despite wearing the badge in the view of the public. But it did have the coolest name, and was decently robust for a Megaraptorid based on the preserved portion of the ribcage. It likely wouldn't have hunted the sauropods it lived with. Nolotitan was still far too big, even for a 2+ ton Megaraptorid, but was still almost certainly the Chorillo Formation's apex predator. Maip, Arostion, and Tratayenia are the 3 most derived Megaraptorids according to the 2022 paper that described the Shadow of Death, forming a trio of large, powerful predators that helped close out the age of the non-avian dinosaurs with a bang. From diminutive generalists in late Jurassic Asia to medium speedsters in Australia to South American megatheropods, Megaraptorans lived the classic rags to riches dream of every potential apex predator clade. The fact that they survived for so long, and diversified throughout their 60 million year tenure on our planet, is a testament to the success of their sleek body plan. Investing in powerful arms and claws in a world where the biggest carnivores went all in on the skull turned out to be a great way to counter-program carcharodontosaurids, and only expanded the menu for Megaraptorans. The questions that they pose for paleontology only increase our fascination with them, and promise bold new directions for research in the future. You might enjoy the other episodes I've done in this series. Between carcharodontosaurids, spiders, elasmobranchs, and pseudosuchians, there's something for everyone. What prehistoric animal clades would you like to see covered in the size, phylogeny, and physiology format next? I'm trying to hold off doing tyrannosauroids for as long as possible because I know I'm going to go berserk with that episode. Maybe ceratopsians or thyreophorans. Go ahead and comment with the clades you'd appreciate seeing the most because it can be difficult to anticipate sometimes which groups people will watch videos about. I'm the Vividen, and I'll see you the next time I nerd out about the coolest animals ever.